I never imagined a day would come when I'd be kicked out of my own son's house. Yet that morning, as my daughter-in-law's voice echoed through the hallway sharp, cold, and dripping with contempt, I felt something inside me fracture. My name is Margaret Hayes, and this is the day betrayal looked me in the eye and pretended it had won. Sophie stood near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, her chin slightly lifted as if she were delivering some royal decree. Her eyes, once warm, once pretending to adore me, held nothing but irritation. "Margaret, you need to go," she said, just like that. No explanation, no hesitation. I froze for a moment, not because I was scared, but because I genuinely couldn't believe she had the audacity to say it. Sophie, the woman I welcomed into my home, into my family, now looked at me as if I were some burden she needed to shove off her shoulders. I lifted my overnight bag from the chair, the soft leather handle warm against my palm. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I didn't remind her who paid the first down payment on the very house she believed she controlled. Sometimes silence is more powerful than 1,000 accusations. I walked slowly toward the front door. The hardwood creaked beneath my feet, each sound echoing like a reminder of how much I had tolerated for the sake of peace. When I reached the entryway, I turned my head just enough to see her expression. She smirked, an actual smirk. "Don't come back without calling first," she added, flicking her hand toward the door as if I were some delivery she was dismissing. A stillness settled over me, a strange, almost serene calm. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. I opened the door, stepped out, closed it gently behind me. She had no idea what she had just done. I walked down the driveway, letting the morning breeze cool my burning frustration. Daniel, my son, was already at work. He had no idea Sophie had staged this little power play, and she made sure he wouldn't find out, at least not yet. But I didn't call him. Not then. Not while the sting of her voice was still scratching at my chest. Something told me to let this moment breathe. When I reached the sidewalk, I turned left, not toward the bus stop, not toward a friend's home, not toward any place Sophie imagined I'd go. I walked toward the small white house at the end of the street, the one with loose shutters, the one with the old porch swing that creaked on warm evenings. A house Sophie never asked about, a house she didn't know existed, a house she certainly didn't know belonged to me. I tucked my hands into my coat pockets as I walked, letting memories swirl around me. Years of sacrifice, years of careful planning, years of building a life brick by brick, while Sophie spent her days bragging to her friends about running the household and taking charge of the property. I never corrected her. Why bother? Let her play pretend. But today, her fantasy world was about to come crashing down. When I reached the house, I unlocked the door with a key she'd never seen. The scent of lavender welcomed me, soft and familiar. Sunlight spilled across the living room floor, warming the wooden furniture, gently reminding me that this piece was mine. I set my bag on the table and eased into the old rocking chair by the window, and for the first time that morning, I smiled. She didn't kick me out onto the street. She pushed me into security she never knew I had, into independence she couldn't touch. Hours passed slowly, quietly, beautifully. By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed. "Daniel." "Mom? Sophie said you left upset. Are you okay? Where are you?" I stared at his message, feeling both love and sadness tangled together. He didn't know. He had no idea what she had done. I typed slowly. "I'm safe. I'll explain later. Come by the other house when you can." I didn't need to clarify. He knew which one. He played in that backyard as a child. As the sun dipped lower, I stepped onto the porch and brewed myself a cup of tea. The porch swing rocked gently beneath me, its rhythm steady, almost comforting. Sophie's mask had finally slipped, and once a mask cracks, it rarely fits back on. A crow cawed from a nearby tree. The wind shifted just slightly. Evening crept in, dipping the sky into oranges and faded golds. And that's when I saw her. Sophie. She stood at the edge of the walkway, her coat thrown over her shoulders, her hair messy as if she'd rushed there. Her eyes scanned the house, my house, slowly at first, then frantically. Then she saw it. The deed papers on the small wooden table near the front window. The ones I had intentionally placed there. The ones with my name, only my name, printed in bold ink. Her face drained of color. She took one step closer, then another. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. She looked small, shattered, like a child realizing the rules of the game she invented didn't apply to me. I didn't move. I didn't invite her in. I didn't even blink. Sometimes truth doesn't need a speech. Sometimes truth stands tall all by itself. And today truth looked like two houses, both owned by the woman she thought she could throw away. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the railing, steadying herself. She finally understood. She had kicked me out of a house I owned, and I had walked straight into another one, also mine. I held her gaze, calm, steady, not angry, not emotional, just done. Truth, when delivered at the right moment, is its own kind of thunder, and I could feel the first rumble. This storm was only beginning. Sophie didn't speak at first. She just clung to the porch railing like the world had suddenly tilted beneath her feet. I watched her chest rise and fall in quick, uneven breaths. Panic Panic had a way of softening her usual arrogance. For once, she didn't look like the queen of the house. She looked like someone who'd finally realized she had miscalculated, and miscalculated badly. She forced out a shaky whisper. "Margaret, why are you here?" I didn't answer. Not right away. My silence made her shift nervously, her fingers gripping the railing tighter. Sophie thrived on control, on being the one who dictated the pace, the tone, the rules. But now, without saying a word, I had taken all of that away from her, and she didn't know what to do without it. I finally stood, the porch swing groaning softly behind me. I walked to the edge of the porch and looked her directly in the eyes. "This is my home, Sophie," I said quietly, calmly, just like the other one. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. Her gaze flicked to the deed papers again, then back to me. I didn't know. Daniel never said. "Perhaps you never asked," I said. A small pause settled in the air, the kind that lets a truth sink in deep. Sophie blinked at me, her eyes glistening, not with sorrow, not with guilt, but with fear. A fear born from one simple realization. She crossed a line with the wrong person. I gestured toward the porch chair. "Sit, Sophie." She hesitated. I could see the battle inside her. Obedience didn't come naturally to her, not when she believed she held power over everyone around her. But today, she quietly pulled the chair back and sat. The world had flipped. She felt it, and I wanted her to feel it. "I didn't throw you out to be cruel," she said suddenly, her voice thin. "I just needed space. Things have been tense, and, Sophie," I cut in softly, "let's not pretend you didn't enjoy it." Her lips pressed into a tight line. She looked away. There it was. Silence. Guilt's first confession. I took a slow breath. "You wanted control over that house. You wanted me out because you thought Daniel would stay silent." She didn't deny it, and that was all the confirmation I needed. The porch wind chimes trembled faintly as the breeze passed by, filling the space between us with a light, uneasy melody. "You treated me like I was disposable," I said, "like I had nowhere else to go." She flinched, but she needed to hear this. "You thought your power came from that roof," I continued. "But Sophie, your power came only from what you assumed I didn't know." I let the words hang there, then added quietly, "And you assumed wrong." She sank back in the chair, deflated. Her confident posture melted into something small, almost fragile. Her voice broke slightly when she spoke again. "Are you going to tell Daniel what happened?" I studied her expression. Not remorse, not reflection, fear, pure fear of consequences. "I don't have to," I replied. "He'll see it himself." And right on cue, headlights turned onto the street. Sophie whipped her head toward the road. Daniel's car rolled to a stop in front of the house. The door opened. My son stepped out, confusion written across his face the moment he spotted the two of us. He walked quickly toward the porch. "Mom? Sophie, what's going on?" Sophie stood abruptly, desperation gripping her voice. "Daniel, I didn't know. I didn't know this house was." Daniel held up a hand. "Sophie, let me hear Mom first." My heart clenched. He had always been a gentle son, patient, fair, the kind of man who didn't jump to conclusions, but even he could sense something wasn't right. He turned to me. "Mom, what happened this morning? Why did you leave the house?" Before I could answer, Sophie rushed in. "It was a misunderstanding. I just asked her to give us some space, and—" "Sophie," Daniel said firmly. "Stop." She froze. He looked back at me, waiting, and in that moment, I felt a kind of strength rise inside me. Not anger, not bitterness, just truth, the simple, unpolished truth. "She told me to leave," I said, "and she meant it." Daniel's jaw tightened, subtle but unmistakable. "You kicked her out?" Sophie's eyes widened. "I didn't kick her out," she insisted. She was in the way, and the house was chaotic, and she thought I had nowhere else to go," I finished softly. Daniel's face paled. He looked at Sophie slowly, like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. "You did that," he said. Not a question, a statement. Sophie opened her mouth, but Daniel held up a finger. "And you didn't think to call me?" "Not once." Her excuses dissolved into thin air. Her lips trembled as she tried to gather a defense, but nothing came. Daniel dragged his hand down his face and stepped back, shaking his head. Then he noticed the deed papers through the window. "Mom, this is your house," he said quietly. I nodded. "And the other one?" he asked, already knowing the answer, already breaking apart inside. I nodded again. "Both houses are in my name." He exhaled sharply, heartbreak looming in his expression. Not heartbreak for me, but for the marriage he now saw more clearly. Sophie reached for his arm. "Daniel, please." He stepped away. "I need time," he said. "I need to think." Then he turned to me with a gentleness Sophie had never understood. "Mom, can I stay here tonight?" My breath caught. "Of course, sweetheart." Sophie looked like the ground had vanished beneath her feet. Her eyes darted between us, panic spiraling into something almost desperate. "Daniel, don't leave. Don't walk away from me. Please, just come home and we'll talk." Daniel stared at her, a strange calm resting in his voice. "Sophie, I don't even know what home means with you anymore." And with that, he walked inside. Sophie remained outside, her body trembling, her eyes filling with a storm storm she had never expected to face. For the first time, the control she clung to so tightly was no longer hers, and I could tell this was just the beginning of her unraveling. Daniel walked into the house without another word, his footsteps heavy, his shoulders tense. I could feel the weight pressing down on him, the betrayal, the shock, the shame of realizing the woman he loved had crossed a line he never thought she would. And behind him, Sophie stood frozen at the foot of the porch. Her hands were shaking, her lips quivered like she was searching for a lifeline that wasn't there anymore. Seeing her like that should have made me feel something: anger, triumph, maybe even satisfaction. But all I felt was a strange, quiet sadness, because when masks fall, there's always a real person underneath, and sometimes that person is much smaller than the mask they wore. She took a small step forward. "Margaret, please, can I talk to him?" I looked at her, calm and steady. "Not right now." She blinked at me, startled by the softness of my tone. Maybe she expected me to lash out. Maybe she expected cruelty. But the truth is, justice doesn't need chaos. Sometimes justice is simply a closed door. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling in the cold. "I didn't mean to hurt him," she whispered. "And yet you did," I replied. She didn't answer. She just stood there, shoulders heaving. Then finally, brokenly, she turned away and started down the sidewalk. Her heels clicked unevenly on the pavement, a wobble in every step, a woman unraveling in real time. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. The porch fell silent. I drew in a long breath and stepped inside. The living room was filled with a soft orange glow from the setting sun. Daniel stood in the center of the room, staring at the papers like they were pieces of a puzzle he had never seen before. He looked up at me. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" he asked, his voice raw. I walked closer. "Because it didn't matter. Not until today." He let out a bitter exhale. "It matters now." I sat in the rocking chair across from him, the same spot I'd sat earlier, the same place I found my calm after being kicked out. "Daniel," I said gently, "I bought this house before you met Sophie. The other one too. I kept them both because I wanted security for all of us." His gaze softened, but the storm inside him didn't fade. I could see the hurt settling deeper than anger, deeper than confusion. "She had no right," he whispered. "No right to treat you like that. No right to assume you were her responsibility." I nodded. "She didn't." He paced the room, running his hands through his hair. "I love her, but what she did, Mom, that isn't love. That's control. That's manipulation." He stopped in front of the window, staring out into the fading light. "Was it always this bad?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. This was the moment I had avoided for years, the moment a mother chooses between protecting her son's illusion and revealing a truth that could break him. I chose the truth. "She's been dismissive," I admitted. "Rude at times. Sharp." I brushed it off. "I didn't want to cause tension in your marriage." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Pain flickered across his face like a shadow. "I should have seen it," he murmured. "I should have noticed." "You trusted her," I said. "That's not a flaw." His jaw tightened. "It feels like one." I stood and walked to his side. "Daniel loved can blind us, but it can also teach us. And right now you're learning." He turned toward me slowly. The boy I raised looked older in that moment, older, wiser, heavier with truth he never asked for. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm so sorry." I rested a hand on his arm. "You didn't do this. Sophie did." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The ticking of the old clock filled the silence, marking each second like a heartbeat. When the quiet finally broke, Daniel said something I didn't expect. "I don't want to go back tonight." "You don't have to." He nodded. His shoulders relaxed just a little, barely enough to notice, but enough to make me feel like he might finally breathe again. We spent the next hour in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I made tea for both of us. Daniel sat on the couch, staring at his hands. A storm had settled in his heart, and storms don't pass in a single evening. When the doorbell finally rang, Daniel stiffened. We both knew who it was. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared at the door. I took a slow breath and stood up. When I opened it, Sophie was there, her mascara streaked, her eyes swollen, her hair messy from wind and worry. "Please," she whispered, "I need to talk to him." I stepped outside, closing the door behind me to give Daniel space. "Sophie," I said quietly, "he's not ready." She shook her head desperately. "I didn't mean to hurt him. I didn't think you'd actually leave. I just you needed control," I finished for her. She froze. "You don't have to admit it to me," I continued, "but you should admit it to yourself." She wiped her cheeks, her voice trembling. "I love him. I believe you," I said, "but love without respect isn't love, Sophie. It's possession." Her breath hitched. "And what you did today," I added, "wasn't love at all." She crumbled then, right there on my porch, knees weak, voice fractured, tears rolling down her cheeks in rivers of regret she didn't know how to dam. "Please," she whispered, "just tell him I'm sorry." "You can tell him yourself," I said softly, "when he's ready." She cried harder, and in that fragile moment I saw it clearly, the beginning of a lesson life had been waiting to give her, a lesson she had avoided for far too long. She stepped back slowly. "Tell him I went home," she whispered. whispered. I nodded once, and she walked away. I watched her until her figure dissolved into the dark. When I stepped back inside, Daniel looked up at me. Was it her? He asked. Yes. He swallowed. What did she say? I sat down, meeting his gaze. She's starting to understand what she's done. Daniel looked toward the door, toward the world where his marriage stood on trembling ground. Good, he said quietly, because this isn't finished. And just like that, I knew the real confrontation hadn't even started yet. I hardly slept that night, not because I was scared, but because the house felt different with Daniel sleeping in the guest room. Every time the floor creaked or the heater clicked on, my heart tugged with memories of when he was small, how he tiptoed into my bedroom after a nightmare, whispering, "Mom, can I stay with you?" And now, decades later, he was back under my roof, carrying a nightmare of his own. Life has a strange way of repeating itself. I made coffee earlier than usual. The sun wasn't even up yet. I stood by the window, cradling the warm mug, watching the sky slowly bleed from black into gray. The quiet was comforting but heavy. Behind me, I heard a door open. Daniel stepped into the kitchen, hair tousled, eyes tired. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. "Morning," he murmured. I smiled gently. "How did you sleep?" He pulled out a chair and sat slowly. "Barely." I nodded. I figured. He rubbed his hands together like he was trying to wake up his own spirit. I kept thinking about everything. All the moments I missed. All the times she talked down to you. I should have said something sooner. "You loved her," I said softly. "Love makes us blind, Daniel. It happens to all of us." He stared at the table, jaw tight. But I saw hints. Little things. I just didn't want to believe them. A small pause followed. The kind that rests heavily on a wounded heart. "She's not a bad person," he added quietly. "But she's lost." I sat beside him. Lost people hurt others, sometimes without even realizing it. He nodded slowly. I reached over and squeezed his hand. "You're facing the truth now. That's what matters." He didn't look at me, but I felt his fingers tighten around mine. "I need to talk to her today," he said. I inhaled deeply. "Are you ready for that?" His shoulders lifted then fell. "I think I need to be." I studied him. He wasn't angry, not anymore. He wasn't panicked or confused or desperate. He was grieving. Grieving the woman he thought he married. Grieving the trust he once had. And grief always leads to clarity. "I'll drive with you if you want," I offered. He shook his head. "No, I need to do this alone." I respected that. He finished his coffee in silence, then stood and grabbed his jacket. "If I'm not back by noon, don't worry. I'll make lunch," I said softly. He gave me a small, tired smile. Then he left. The quiet settled again, heavier this time. I walked to the living room and stood by the window, watching him drive away. My heart twisted for him, for Sophie, for the mess they created together. I knew their marriage wasn't perfect, but divorce changes people. It breaks something inside both sides, even the one who caused the pain. And I wasn't sure either of them understood the depth of what was coming. Hours passed slowly, too slowly. I cleaned the kitchen, straightened the bookshelf, watered the plants, all small tasks, things I could control while everything else felt like it was teetering on the edge. By the time the clock struck noon, my stomach had twisted itself into knots. At 12:14 p.m., the front door opened. Daniel walked in. His eyes were red, his posture slumped. My heart dropped. I rushed to him. "Daniel, what happened?" He sat heavily on the couch, placing his elbows on his knees. He raked his hands through his hair again, a sign he was overwhelmed. "She broke down," he whispered. "Completely." I sat beside him slowly. "Tell me." He swallowed hard. "When I walked into the house, she was sitting at the dining table. The whole place was quiet. She didn't get up. She didn't yell. She just looked at me." He paused, shaking his head. "She apologized, Mom, for the first time, genuinely." I felt my breath catch. "She said she was ashamed," he continued. "Said she didn't know why she spoke to you like that. Said she panicked because she thought she wasn't enough. She thought you threatened her place." His voice cracked. I gently touched his back. "Oh, honey." He closed his eyes tightly. "I didn't know she felt that way. I didn't know she was struggling with insecurity, jealousy, fear." I listened quietly. "She told me she thought you judged her, that you looked down on her, that you wanted to control our marriage." I stiffened. "Daniel, I never." I know, he said quickly. And today she realized she was wrong. She admitted it. All of it. He leaned back exhausted. "We talked for hours," he whispered. "She cried. I cried." A long silence draped over us. Finally, he continued. "She asked for a chance to make things right, to earn your respect, to earn mine again." I exhaled slowly. "And what did you tell her?" I asked. He stared at the ceiling for a moment, gathering courage. "I told her I need space," he said. "That trust isn't rebuilt in a day. That she crossed a line she shouldn't have touched." He paused. "But I also told her I'm willing to try, if she's willing to change." I nodded slowly, thoughtfully. Then I asked the question that mattered most. "And do you believe she will?" He hesitated, a long, heavy hesitation. Finally, he whispered, "I don't know." I reached for his hand again. He let me hold it. His fingers were cold, like he'd been carrying too much weight. "You don't have to know today," I I said. Just breathe. Just heal. The rest will come. He nodded, tears silently sliding down his cheeks, and in that moment my heart ached for both of them, for a marriage balancing on a thin, trembling line, for a woman learning accountability for the first time, for a man rediscovering his boundaries. We sat quietly for a long time. Then Daniel spoke again, soft, fragile. Mom, she wants to talk to you. My chest tightened. She wants to apologize, he said. In person. I didn't answer immediately, because forgiveness is a complicated thing, and sometimes the truth is you want justice more than reconciliation. But before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Daniel's eyes widened. She came, he whispered. He stood slowly. I stood with him. He reached for the doorknob, and with one deep breath, he opened the door. When Daniel opened the door, Sophie stood there like a shadow, fragile, hesitant, and carrying a heaviness I'd never seen on her before. Her eyes were swollen, cheeks streaked with dry tears, and her hands trembled as if she were scared to even breathe. For once, there was no arrogance in her posture, no entitlement, no smirk, just a woman unraveling. She looked at Daniel first. Thank you for letting me come, she whispered. Daniel didn't speak. He simply stepped aside, giving her room to enter. Then her eyes found mine, and she froze. The air went still between us, thick, fragile, loaded with the weight of everything unspoken. I didn't move toward her. I didn't soften. I stood exactly where I was, letting her feel the space she created when she pushed me out of her home. Sophie swallowed hard. Margaret, may I talk to you? Please. Daniel glanced at me gently, waiting. I nodded once. Come in. She stepped inside slowly, like she was afraid the floor might break beneath her. She stood in the living room while I remained by the window. It felt like we were on opposite sides of a long, silent bridge. A bridge she had burned. A bridge she now wanted to rebuild. She wrung her hands together, trembling. I'm not here to make excuses, she began. I hurt you, and I'm ashamed. Her voice cracked. I didn't respond. Not yet. She took a shaky breath and continued. When I married Daniel, I wanted so badly to be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law. I wanted everything to be perfect, but instead of admitting when I felt insecure, I lashed out. She blinked through fresh tears. I convinced myself you didn't like me, that you judged me, that you thought I wasn't good enough. Her voice wavered, and instead of talking to you, I tried to push you away. Her words hung between us like thin, tangled threads. She wiped her eyes. The day I asked you to leave, I didn't think you'd go. I thought you'd argue or call Daniel or fight back. She looked down at her hands, but you didn't. And when you walking away didn't bother you, even a little, I panicked. I raised an eyebrow. Why? She met my eyes with a raw, trembling honesty, because it made me realize I never had the kind of power I thought I had. I let out a slow breath. She was finally seeing it, finally understanding the reality she'd ignored. Sophie continued, voice shaking. When I saw you here in another house, one you also owned, I felt small. I felt stupid. I felt like everything I tried to control didn't matter anymore. She looked toward the floor, and I deserved that feeling. A soft pause settled in the room, the kind that lets truth seep in like rain through dry soil. Daniel stepped slightly closer to us but remained silent. He was giving Sophie space to speak and giving me space to hear. She wiped her nose with a tissue, her voice hoarse. I want to be better, Margaret. I want to earn your respect. I want to fix what I broke. She swallowed. I want you to forgive me, someday. Her voice softened to a whisper, and I know I haven't earned that yet. I studied her carefully, not with anger, not with judgment, with clarity, because for the first time since Daniel married her, I was seeing the real Sophie, the woman behind the insecurities, the woman behind the sharp tongue, the woman behind the performance, a woman who didn't know how to share a home without claiming ownership, a woman who mistaken control for love, a woman who was terrified of being replaced. I stepped forward slowly. Sophie, I said gently, forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something you show you deserve. Her eyes widened, glistening, and showing it, I continued, takes time, takes patience, takes consistency, not one apology. She nodded quickly, wiping tears. I know that, and I'm willing to do that work. I tilted my head slightly, not for Daniel's sake, and not even for mine. A small pause, but for your own. She covered her mouth, crying silently. Daniel stepped forward then, touching her shoulder gently. Sophie, I appreciate your apology, and I believe you want to change, but this isn't going to be easy. She nodded hard. I understand. No more secrets, he said softly. No more manipulation. No more pushing my mother aside to feel secure. Yes, she whispered. I promise. And if we do try to fix this, Daniel added, you need to understand one thing clearly. She looked up at him, waiting. My mom isn't going anywhere. Sophie inhaled sharply, then nodded again, slower this time. She understood. Finally, I took a step closer. Sophie, I said gently, he loves you, and love is worth fighting for, but you can't fight for it by tearing someone else down. She nodded, tears dripping onto her shirt. I'm sorry, she whispered, for everything. My voice softened. I hear you." A long breath escaped her lips. "And I'm willing to start over," I said. Her head shot up. "But starting over doesn't mean forgetting," I added calmly. "It means rebuilding." She nodded, crying harder now. Daniel exhaled deeply, some pressure lifting from his shoulders. We stood there, three flawed people, three hurting hearts, three lives tangled in a moment that felt both devastating and hopeful. Finally, Sophie wiped her cheeks once more. "I'll go home now," she said quietly. I need to give you both space." Daniel nodded. "I'll come by later." She whispered a soft thank you, then walked to the door, holding the handle with trembling fingers. Before stepping out, she turned back to me. "Margaret, I won't waste this chance." Then she left. Daniel closed the door gently behind her. We both stood in the quiet. The storm had calmed a little, but the ground was still shaking. And as I watched my son sink onto the couch exhausted, I felt one thing clearly. The real test hadn't started yet, because forgiveness is one thing, but trust is a mountain, and Sophie was about to learn. Mountains don't move easily. The next few days felt like walking through a house made of thin glass. Every sound felt sharper, every breath heavier, every moment stretched between hope and fear. Daniel moved quietly around the second house, lost in his thoughts, and even though we shared meals, shared rooms, shared the same quiet, I could tell his heart was miles away, because heartbreak doesn't just bruise. It rearranges everything inside you. On the third morning, he sat at the kitchen table staring at his untouched coffee, his fingers tapping lightly against the ceramic mug. I walked in slowly, sensing the storm in him. "You haven't slept," I said softly. He didn't look up. "I keep thinking." I pulled out the chair beside him. "About Sophie?" He finally lifted his eyes, tired, red, clouded with a kind of exhaustion that comes from thinking too much and healing too slowly. "Yes," he whispered. A small pause hovered between us. "She's trying, Mom. She calls. She texts. She sends these long messages explaining everything. Why she acted the way she did, how she wants to change, how she's going to therapy." His voice cracked. "Part of me wants to believe her. The other part can't forget what she did." I nodded. "Both parts are real. Both parts deserve your attention." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Do you think people change?" I looked at him, at my grown son with a breaking heart, and I answered as honestly as I could. "Yes, but not quickly, and not easily." He stared at the table again. "I'm scared. Scared of giving her another chance, and scared of not giving her one." That was the kind of fear that traps a person in place. And Daniel had been standing still for days. I reached over and touched his hand. "You don't have to choose today." He nodded, but the knot in his chest stayed tight. Later that afternoon, he stepped outside for a walk. I watched him from the window, shoulders slumped, head down, hands tucked into his pockets. He walked like a man carrying stones. I made tea and waited for him. He returned an hour later, calmer but still carrying quiet sadness. "She wants to see us," he said softly. I listened. "She wants to show us something. She said it's important." I felt a strange tightening in my stomach. Did she say what it was? No. I studied his expression. "Do you want to go?" He hesitated. "I think I need to." The next morning, we drove to their house. The house Sophie once believed was hers to command. The house she used to push me out of. The house that now belonged to Daniel and Sophie emotionally, but to me legally. Walking back toward it felt surreal. As we approached, Sophie was already standing outside, hands clasped tightly together, her face pale, her eyes swollen from days of crying. She looked smaller somehow, quieter, softened at the edges. When she saw us, her shoulders dropped with relief. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Daniel gave a small nod. I stayed silent, observing. She motioned toward the house. "I want to show you something." We followed her inside. The living room was spotless, unnervingly so. The furniture had been rearranged, the clutter removed, and on the coffee table sat a binder filled with neatly organized papers. Sophie pointed to it with trembling fingers. "I made a plan," she said. "A real one. For counseling, for chores, for communication, for boundaries, for how I treat you." She looked at me with a mixture of fear and fragile hope. I wrote down every way I messed up, every way I want to do better. Not because I want to impress you, but because I need to fix myself. Daniel flipped through the binder. His eyes softened with every page. I watched him closely. I watched her even more closely. Then Sophie walked to the dining table and held up a second document, one I didn't expect to see. A legal document. "I contacted a lawyer," she said quietly. "This form gives Daniel full financial control of the house, the bills, the decisions, everything." Daniel's head snapped up. "Sophie, why would you?" She swallowed. "Because I wanted control before, and it destroyed everything. I don't want control anymore. I want trust." She set the document down, her hands shaking. "And if giving you control helps rebuild that, then I'm ready." Daniel stared at her, overwhelmed. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not trust, but a softening in a corner of my heart I didn't expect. She wasn't manipulating. She wasn't acting. She was surrendering. A woman doesn't hand over power unless she truly wants to change. Then she turned to me. "Margaret," she said softly, "I know I can't can't erase what I did, but I want you to know something. I waited. I've booked therapy, real therapy, not the kind people pretend to do. And they gave me homework. Her eyes filled with tears again. My assignment was to confront the person I've hurt most with honesty. And that's you. My breath caught. She took a step closer. I'm sorry I treated you like an enemy, she whispered. I'm sorry I made you feel unwelcome in the house you made for us. I'm sorry I acted out of fear and jealousy and let it turn into cruelty. Her voice trembled. And if you ever decide to forgive me, I promise you I will not waste it. The house went silent. Only the soft ticking of the wall clock filled the space. Daniel looked at me, eyes pleading for guidance. I breathed slowly, carefully. Sophie, I said gently, this is a good start, but it's only a start. She nodded quickly. I know. You will have to keep showing this. Not once, not twice, but every day. I will, she promised. I swear. Daniel reached for her hand then, hesitantly, and she broke into tears at the simple gesture. I turned away slightly, giving them a moment, giving myself a moment, because something was shifting, something important, something fragile. And as I looked around the house I owned, the house they broke, the house they now wanted to rebuild, I realized we had all arrived at a crossroads, a place where two futures diverged, one of healing, one of separation, and only time would reveal which path they would walk. But as we prepared to leave, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A single message, a message that changed everything. I glanced down, and my heart stopped. The moment I looked at my phone, the world around me faded into a quiet hum. My heart pressed hard against my ribs as the screen lit up with a name I hadn't expected. My sister Evelyn, a name that carried years of distance and wounds we never healed. Her message was short. Margaret, call me. It's important. Important. That word always comes with weight and rarely with comfort. Daniel noticed my expression shifting. Mom, what's wrong? I swallowed slowly. It's Evelyn. His eyebrows lifted in surprise. You haven't talked in years. I know, I said softly. Sophie watched us quietly, hands still trembling at her sides, tears still drying on her face. For a moment, the tension between us all shifted. Suddenly, we weren't dealing with marriage problems, apologies, or power. We were just three people frozen in a fragile moment, waiting for the next breath to decide everything. Daniel touched my arm. Do you want us to step outside? I shook my head. No, I'll take it here. I dialed her number with slow, steady fingers. The ringing felt endless, each tone pulling old memories to the surface. Fights we never resolved, words we never apologized for, silence that grew into oceans. Finally, she answered. Margaret. Her voice was older than I remembered, softer too. Thank you for calling. I closed my eyes for a moment. What's going on? There was a pause, long, shaky, emotional. It's about Mom, Evelyn whispered. My chest tightened. Is she okay? Another silence. No, she said. My breath caught. She's been sick for months. She didn't want us to worry. But yesterday she got worse. The doctors say we should come. My fingers trembled slightly around the phone. Mom. Suddenly everything I thought was important, the house, the tension, the apologies, all of it dimmed under a bigger truth. Life doesn't wait for our wounds to heal before it asks more of us. When do I need to come? I asked quietly. As soon as you can, she whispered. She keeps asking for you. My throat tightened. Okay, I'll be there. When I hung up, the room felt still, heavy, sacred. Daniel stepped closer. Mom, what happened? I took a steady breath. Your grandmother is very sick. I need to go home. His face softened into concern. Do you want me to drive you? I nodded. I'd like that. He squeezed my hand gently. We'll go now. I turned to Sophie. She stood there, pale, wiping her face with shaky hands. The vulnerability in her eyes deepened, not from guilt this time, but from understanding. Margaret, she said softly, I'm so sorry. Whatever you need, I'll help. Whatever Daniel needs, I'll support. I nodded. Thank you. And for the first time, we meant the things we were saying. We drove in silence for a while. Daniel behind the wheel, jaw clenched in worry. Me staring out the window at the blur of passing streets. Sophie sitting in the back seat, her hands folded, quiet as a prayer. Life has its own timing, and it rarely matches the plans we make. When we reached my childhood home, Evelyn rushed to the door, pulling me into a hug that melted a decade of distance. Margaret, she whispered. She's inside. We walked into the bedroom where Mom lay resting, frail and pale, her breathing shallow but steady. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard us enter. Mom, I whispered, taking her hand, her lips curved into the faintest smile. There's my girl. My heart cracked open. Sophie stayed quietly near the doorway, giving us space. Daniel placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Mom's voice was soft, barely above a breath. I'm glad you came. I'm here, I said, tears slipping quietly down my cheeks. She squeezed my hand. Family is all we have, even when it's messy, even when it hurts. I nodded, swallowing hard. She turned her eyes toward Daniel and Sophie. Take care of each other, she whispered, and take care of her. Sophie took a tiny step forward, as if the blessing was meant for her too. Mom's gaze found mine again. Forgive where you can, but protect your peace. You hear me? I hear you, I whispered. whispered. Her hand relaxed in mine, and in that moment, surrounded by the people connected to my heart in different complicated ways, I realized something powerful. Life is too short to cling to anger, but it's also too precious to abandon boundaries. Later that evening, as I stood on the porch of my childhood home, Daniel joined me. The sky was painted in shades of rose and amber, the world quiet after a long day of emotion. "Mom," he said gently, "are you okay?" "No," I admitted, "but I will be." He nodded. "Sophie said she's going to give me time and earn trust slowly." "That's good," I said. "Marriage isn't about perfection. It's about effort." He nodded again, eyes soft. "And you?" he asked. "Will you be okay living between the two houses for a bit?" I smiled faintly. "I've lived between two kinds of peace my whole life. I'll be fine." He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "We'll figure this out," he said, and somehow I believed him. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Sophie stepped onto the porch, nervous but hopeful. She looked at me, not with fear, not with guilt, but with sincerity. "Margaret," she said softly, "I meant what I said. I'm going to do better. I want us to have a real relationship, if you'll let me." I took a slow breath. "Then start by being honest," I said. "I will," she whispered, "every day." And as the light faded, leaving us in the soft glow of a new beginning, I felt something shift inside me, something gentle, something real. Forgiveness isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a different one, a quieter one, a wiser one, a stronger one, and it's one we were finally ready to write.